Hi there, my name is Danny Henderson. I welcome you back to my beautiful, although sometimes harrowing, disclosure channel. Now, do not let your children hear the next hour, please. Do not let your children hear the information. Protect our children. That's our job. That's our first job. Protect the children. But please don't be selfish and let them hear this very traumatizing, upsetting information that we're going to share. That the great Cathy O Brien has suffered, lived, and survived, and most certainly endured. Cathy O Brien, welcome, my darling friend.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, the children don't need to hear this, but their parents certainly do in order to effectively protect them. So beautiful, beautiful opening.
Thank you. Well, we need to give those warnings again for people to again open their mind to the fact that we're going to name some names in government, in American government from the 1970s and 80s and 90s of people that they have adored and looked up to who are absolute monsters and being called to task today in 2025. I mean, they're 30 years overdue, more than that, but that's what's happening. So in our broadcast last week, we said that this week we would talk about some of the ways that you were used as a robotic sex slave, a mule, a carrier of messages within the American government, White House and Pentagon, but also global leaders, if that's what you want to call them. So there were things used called codes, keys, and triggers. Could you share with us who Ronald Reagan really was and why was he using over the rainbow conversation and terminology with you?
My primary mind control programmer, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, is the one who was using the program. He would do the programming and then hand the triggers over to my abusers. And Ronald Reagan was one person that I was exposed to extensively in my MK Ultra victimization. And it's important to note too that George Bush and Dick Cheney ran his administration after the assassination attempt. They took over. Reagan was extremely traumatized. They intended to take him out and take over because he wasn't cooperating with the globalist agenda. And instead, they took over his mind. And in that process, he too was conditioned to the codes, keys, and triggers of certain theme programs, whether it was alien theme, demonic theme, or something like Wizard of Oz, and those were very common themes because the subconscious mind doesn't have an ability to discern fantasy from reality. It only just has information in without a critical analysis ability to question anything. It's just, information in. And that could include something as simple as like the Wizard of Oz and the extreme programming that so many have endured with that particular theme. And in cases like that, what would happen is I would be given like a code that someone would recognize. Like I would have emerald earrings on, and that meant Emerald City. Or I would have ruby, and that would mean like the ruby slippers, and both indicated Oz programming. The Oz, the Emerald City was more along the lines of the cocaine operations, and the ruby was more along the lines of the prostitution end. So, if those earrings were seen, especially by someone like Reagan, they would know the mode the minute they see it. In essence, it would trigger them to know exactly what to do. And so that's kind of how that works. They replace codes, keys, and triggers through manipulating the subconscious mind and reprogramming it. Whereas the natural mode of that would be like my father's sexual abuse of me in infancy. The neuron pathways would shut down around the trauma and repress it. And I wouldn't think of it because the rest of the mind was developing normally. But when my father came in to abuse me again, that would trigger the part of my brain that knew he was what he was doing, into action. So that's more of a normal trigger. It's more the event itself that triggers it. But these were replaced with codes, keys, and triggers. And they were very program specific and theme specific so that others would know what particular mode was being used. And then there were people like Dick Cheney who would flip over the hourglass to let me know my time was running out. You know, that he held my life in his hands in essence. That's what they would do. So they would use that as one and say, I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too. People who have been horribly abused usually see animals abused too, and animals are just so pure. Or we see the children abused. And so Cheney would say, I'll get you, my pretty, and your little girl too, meaning my daughter Kelly. So that was how they would trigger and use that kind of programming. And then additionally, among themselves, they could refer to the field of poppies. What are poppies? Opium, you know? So that was about the opium fields and taking over the opium industry. When the snow fell on the field of poppies and woke everyone up, that represented the cocaine. So that was called snow. So these are ways that these words were taken from something as simple as a child's fantasy cartoon and incorporated into MK Ultra mind control, ultimately because the subconscious has no rational, conscious filter of that information. So it's just information in an instantaneous response.
Let's go back a step to Reagan again. So when he first came into power with Nancy, the world thought this was just such a great thing. I, as a little girl, watching him on telly, thought he was just dreamy, like John Wayne, he was another hero of mine. And I remember years later, meeting you and something was mentioned about Reagan, and I said to you, "Oh God, don't tell me Reagan's a bad guy." And you went, "Okay, I won't tell you Reagan's a bad guy." And I was like, "Oh my God," I think that's what really triggered me to finally have the courage to read this book, your book, that blows the whistle on all of them. Reagan, Cheney, the Bushes, the Clintons, everybody. Every evil monster's name is in here. The operations, the code words, the things they did, it's all in there. And so again, we need to break the glass ceiling on the illusions that people have, their own mind control programming, to believe that leaders in the world care about them. When I specifically say over and over again, these hideous men, these monsters, are carving up the world between themselves, and they are taking and raping and ruining and destroying and murdering children, innocent children, and trafficking blue-eyed blonde babies into Saudi Arabia, for example. But I want to stop for a second and pull back a minute because I don't want to let Reagan off the hook because he's a good right to kind of bring to attention, which will then help other people accept more easily others who we're obviously naming that you've named in the 1980s in your book. So tell us about his relationship with Nancy, what that was, and when you said you were exposed to Reagan many times, what did you mean by that?
I was prostituted to him often, and that was part of my victimization when I was in the White House. I would be with Reagan while George Bush took my daughter Kelly, and he was such a pedophile, brutal person. George Bush was. And so I would be with Reagan during that time while we were in the White House, while Kelly was with Bush.
Young Bush
And
or old Bush? Which Bush, to be clear?
George Bush Sr.
The old man, the filthy, dirty bastard that was the CIA director,
Yes.
shipping drugs, shipping kids, Project Studebaker. People just go look that up. They think these men are so great. They're filthy monsters harming your little girl. My God, it's
Yes.
so
And
unthinkable.
and many others, And George Bush told us he was ushering in the New World Order. He told us all that blatantly, and people didn't know what that meant. They didn't know it was a slave society agenda, that it were a handful of puppet masters at the top had control over all of humanity. And mind control is their key for ushering it in. So George Bush was an absolute master of mind control of individuals, of nations of the world. He was one of the most vile perpetrators of this agenda that I ever encountered. And he definitely believed in the pedophile agenda, which is just a mind control agenda. It's such a trauma that shuts down the neuron pathways in the children and makes them more compliant and easily led the rest of their lives. So it's not about a physical sexual perversion. It's about control. It's about brutal control. And it's about a domineering attitude of thinking they should manipulate minds of other people, because it's very, very evil, because without free thought, we lose our free will soul expression. And when we lose our soul expression, we have no discernment of truth. We have no compassion for each other. We have no ability to live our life's purpose and align with that divine within, live our love, live the love we are. We don't have access to any of that with mind control. So in so many ways, it is a spiritual, mind control is a spiritual warfare to subdue our humanity. You know, it attacks the very essence of our being to make us more compliant, to fall in line with their criminal minds, which is flat linear thinking. And they follow a DARPA generated computerized artificial intelligence plan. So that's flat thinking too. And when we have our free thought, free will, soul expression, we have wisdom. We outthink their criminal minds. We outthink artificial intelligence. So that humanity within us, this strength, the spirit's under attack to keep us from being able to have a high enough vibration to outthink them. And George Bush was acutely aware of this. And so he assaulted children. He was brutal in every way. Kelly and I were both subjected to the most dangerous game of human hunting, horrible, brutal abuses and subsequent mind control programming. It's absolutely horrific. It's hard, even having been around these people. I can say they are not like us and they do not like us. But I understand why most people can't wrap their brains around such evil, because they're not like that to even know that. But then again, they're not like us either. So they can't understand our strength of spirit. They can't grasp it. So they try to keep us from grasping it. And all we need to do is just reclaim our free thought, free will, and strength of spirit. And all of a sudden we have the ability to outthink them. When we have the ability to outthink them, we have enough strength to understand what in the world has us to this point that we're living today.
Fantastic. I mean, horrific. And I just wanted to check because we're getting a little bit of interference here. Okay, good, strong internet. So again, to make the point, to labor the point that you were prostituted to Ronald Reagan several times, and Dick Cheney would abuse you in the worst, despicable, unthinkable ways to the point of death over and over and over again. And George Bush Sr., yeah, and he's dead. And people are like, oh, you can't speak ill of the dead. Oh, yes, we can, and we shall, and we
Yes,
do. Doesn't matter if you're dead, you're getting it. You are getting it, Miss. You're all getting it. We're bringing all the names, all of them. I mean, you did in the 1980s. It's right here. Right
yeah.
here. Transformation of America. It's not like it's new. But to a lot of people, like you and I were saying, I feel terrible. I feel like sometimes I'm kind of dragging, like I don't, and they would never abuse our friendship. But sometimes I feel like, oh my God, we're going to go to some really dark places today, because I know there are so many millions of people that have no clue of the evil in the men and women that run our whole world. Of course, not all of them. It's like, grow up. People go, do you mean all of them? Do you mean all of NASA? No, I don't. I mean certain people in these environments. Yeah, so George Bush, dirty, filthy pedophile, harming your little baby girl in
Yeah.
unthinkable ways. Younger than 6 years old, did he start on her?
Absolutely did. And she was 2 and when she was in the White House, and just standing there all robotic and everything. And for me, there's no physical torture. There's no brutality I ever experienced that was as horrific as knowing that I could not protect my daughter from that abuse. It's not that I could consciously understand, but intuitively, maternally, I knew. And it was the most horrible, horrific control that they could possibly have tapped into, and they knew it. And just the same way they tapped into families during mind control masks as a virus, and dividing people. Everybody was just concerned about the well-being of each other. It was all love, but it was so distorted. Those who bought into the media fear narrative, those who were thinking free, and the clash that happened was absolutely horrific. In Kelly's, in my case, it was not just an attempt at division, because it never worked. It was an attempt to manipulate us both by the horror of thinking the other would be hurt. Like, I'll get you, my pretty, and your mama too. It was so they would reverse it on her and use it that way. So we were talking about it in later years, and she took abuse thinking she was protecting me. I took abuse thinking I was protecting her. Neither one of us protected each other at all. Same during mind control masks as a virus. People didn't protect each other. It just divided. And when we get down to love, when we understand the components of mind control, we realize that these perpetrators will attack the most sacred aspects of our humanity, our families, our maternal instincts, our love for each other, our ability to align with the divine and live our life's purpose, our ability to, they attack all of that, because that's what scares them, is that we're so powerful, and they only have as much power as we give them or let them steal. They're afraid we're going to wake up to remember who we are and why we're here, that we have all the power, and stop letting them steal it.
Right, and that's happening. I just saw a massive orb fly across my living room, a beautiful angel orb, but you're an angel, so it's
Um,
there. And it's kind of, so upsetting talking about these things and just thinking about you and little Kelly and all the other children that were unalived and children that you saw being unalived in the hunting games. Where were
yeah.
the hunting games, the human hunting games of women and children and little boys and little girls? Where were they held, and who ran them? Who was there unaliving these children, please?
The very first one I was exposed to in the 70s was on Dick Cheney's ranch in Wyoming. And that was the first time I was exposed to the human hunting. That's just one of his favorite things to do. Other games they play it pretty much anywhere. They'll play it at Bohemian Grove. They played it at Mount Shasta compound. They did it at the Swiss Villa Amphitheater in Lampe, Missouri, near Bill Clinton's Mina cocaine operations. Bill Clinton participated. The three that were so predominant in it were Dick Cheney, Bill Clinton, and George Bush. George Bush and Bill Clinton were very, very good, close friends. And that is so evident of that this globalist agenda doesn't care about party lines. They only care about who's going to cooperate and who doesn't, who believes in the slave society agenda and who doesn't. And if someone doesn't, they either take them out like they attempted to do with Reagan, or they mind control them like they did with Reagan, or they'll use coercion, blackmail. That's what all these blackmail videos are about, Danny, is because they hold each other in line with it. They don't trust each other either, so they hold each other by the blackmail, so to speak. There's varying levels of blackmail. Those who go into these boys' clubs, secret societies, and cooperate with it as their initiation. Those who are drugged and filmed with in a horribly perverse situation for blackmail purposes to control them going forward. Those whose families' lives are threatened. That's a very common one. There's many ways people are forced into complying with this, because ultimately, when we get down to the reality of it, there aren't that many of these really bad, dark, negative, low vibration energy force perpetrators on our planet. It looks like more of them because they control the media. It looks like more of them because they're controlling nations. And it looks like more of them because they're controlling the minds of so many people. The Great Awakening is happening as people open their eyes. My daughter Kelly was saying just the other day, it was so brilliant. She said, this Great Awakening is so exciting. And now that people are awake and are waking up, they have a long way to go to catch up and realize how we got here and what we need to learn in order that it never happens again.
Again, what you just said there about darling Kelly, I mean, this young lady now has lived away from you. They took her away from you. They put her into the child prosecute, whatever.
Yes.
So they took her from you for years and years and years and tortured you, kept you apart, and it's just unthinkable. But this young lady has, like her mother, a strength and a resilience. Oh my God, I'm going to cry. I'm not going to cry. It's not about me. Anyway, I'm just so happy for you. So happy.
She's amazing. She is amazing, Danny. She's the most brilliant example of the strength of the human spirit. She had such a compound felony, being raised in MK Ultra and then being thrust into the corrupted system. When she was thrust into the so-called Child Protective Services, they medically kidnapped her out of a hospital and took custody. And it was a plan. It was just planned that way to further traumatize us both. And, they never could stop our love. They never could. And that my love for her is what motivated me to start speaking out in 1990. I was trying to raise awareness for her circumstance. So a mother's love, that's such a powerful force, and
Yeah.
they can't really stop it. They can only create illusions. And when we all get down back to the base core energy of who we are and reclaim that love, reclaim that alignment with the divine, we find the truth and the reality of the infinite power of that love. So, it's amazing what Kelly and I enjoy today. Um, we're together all the time and have so much laughter and joy because we don't live in our past.
Yeah.
We don't mourn what would have been, should have been, could have been, but instead we look through the filter that our past experiences have given us to give us a better understanding of what's going on in the world, to give us a better understanding of what's happening with other people, to give us more compassion. And it gives us so much that we share today that's deeply profound that, if everyone could understand that aspect of resiliency, everyone would understand all these petty little annoyances they find in each other are so trivial.
Yeah.
The way they've taken families apart, the way that friends um, argue, the things they argue over, the way that relationships, people in relationships even, what they argue over. And then, there's so many of us speaking out right now. And then some get, I don't know what the deal is, but they start undermining the others and they get upset because someone had interview they wanted or what, I don't get that. I don't get ego stuff,
It's unreal.
but
Yeah.
it's so shallow compared to the magnitude of
Yeah.
who we all really are inside and
Yeah.
where we unite. This is a time for truth. This is a time to get it out there so that we can effectively protect our children and the future of humanity going forward.
Yeah. It's just amazing. It's so true. It's funny. And it is funny. We had to laugh because, Max Lowen's coming to speak at Galactic Spiritual Informers as you are. And Max was trafficked under the Vatican, a child from a
Yes.
satanic family. And of course, we don't care. We don't care to listen to the leaders of yesterday and today because we don't trust them. We know they're monsters.
Right.
And that's why I
Right.
would absolutely trust you and Max Lowen and Rachel Vaughan any day. But then, it's like drip, drip, drop, drop. Danny Henderson's Cathy O Brien's handler. Really? I mean, the other day
I know.
it's
I
like
know.
Oprah's. I'm handling Oprah. It doesn't. Right. And these are women who claim to
Yeah,
have been through similar things that you have. Why on earth would they turn on each other? It's the most ludicrous thing in the
it
world.
is. It is. It's hard to believe how people do that, but I guess they just get upset for certain reasons. And if it's a survivor, oftentimes survivors haven't healed fully from within. We have to heal fully from within in order to open those neuron pathways so that we're not triggered anymore, so that we can't be triggered. And if they get triggered, listen to an interview, they'll get a crossover of their past intruding on their present, and they don't differentiate anymore, and all of a sudden, oh, you're the handler, because that happens in the brain when we don't heal from within properly. Mark was so wise to tell me I had to heal first in order to have something to give in a relationship. That was very, very true. And I'm grateful to him for that. I'm so grateful because then I could heal to be 100% who I am. And that way we weren't 50-50 pulling at each other, and that way I was healed and didn't cross over and blame him for the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This happens in our brains when we don't heal properly. And Mark was so wise in ensuring I healed first. And I celebrate that constantly and it gives me the ability to understand what other survivors are doing and have compassion for them. But at the same time, it's also an intolerance. It's like, well, don't speak out before you heal from within first. You need to take care of you first before you judge other people.
That's brilliant. I'm just going to invite people to go back to my channel and look at our broadcast from last week where we covered the beautiful Mark Phillips that rescued you out of the mind control slavery with little Kelly. When he found out about it, he couldn't live with himself. He rescued you. And then that began your healing journey, which we went into depth last week. So guys, go back and watch that one. Let's focus on right now, because this also astounds me. Not only are we obviously exposing the Clintons, the Bushes, the Reagans, everyone in on abusing the power, you being prostituted to Reagan and others, Dick Cheney, horrendous. But the security guards, the nurses, the doctors, like, how do they even live with themselves today, knowing they were complicit, knowing they were compliant? And I imagine some of them were under certain mind controls too. But I want to point out specifically Goddard Space Flight Center, which was a NASA installation, and it relied on the men and women there seemed to rely on Admiral Byrd for funding, and they would use a drug on you. This drug is a NASA CIA drug. It's called Tranquility. Can you please give insight into what it was like, and how did you feel about these people strapping you to tables and the staff, like knowing and being invited to gang grape you because you were about to be ended in a snuff film? Like, these people are going to get called over the coals as well. They best know that.
They should. And I didn't have any capacity to fear or dread. I had no ability to think ahead in that regard. I had no ability to really feel anymore. When people are so depersonalized, they lose their ability to feel. The sexual abuse of a child is so horrific. When it involves the penetration, it does horrible things to their bodies, and finally the brain can't even process that much pain anymore. So it kind of doesn't process it anymore. So in that regard, there was no ability to think, to dread that kind of thing. The Goddard Space Flight Center was one that was using the DARPA-generated artificial intelligence plan. DARPA was just so much a part of all this, and in so many ways, the people who were there were aligned with it, whether by choice or however they ended up being aligned with it. They were. And so there's varying levels of mind control. And rather than blaming them, we need to factor that mind control into the equation. It's like the doctors and nurses who participated in mind control masters of virus. There's so many of them coming forward right now going, what did I do to these people? They're seeing the results of the injections, and why did I do it? And they realize, oh, they had been indoctrinated in their education. When you follow the money in the medical education system, it goes right to big pharma. Big pharma's dictating their education. Their education tells them to follow big pharma. That's what they do, and then so they're programmed to do big pharma's bidding. They're realizing that now, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" Well, understand the programming, and we need to hold these programmers, we need to hold these abusers accountable for their actions and what they've done to manipulate us all. This goes through all walks of society, and it does go through NASA, it goes through DARPA, it goes through everything. You know, we need to all wake up and hold these puppet masters at the very top accountable and stop following these self-appointed, self-anointed leaders that we didn't elect, because they're not like us, they do not like us, and their agenda is very, very dark.
Mhm. I think a lot of people don't understand that. Well, today I interviewed a great guy called Michael Phly, and I'd watched a documentary he made previously because he talks about kind of undercurrents and Masonics and symbols and war memorials, and the fact that our children are sent off to die in wars that are created by these evil monsters who are all in bed with each other, literally and figuratively. And their kids all go to Harvard and Princeton and Yale because there's a program. Now, I'm not saying that, we should have compassion or not. That's an individual choice. But a lot of these men and women in these top jobs have also gone through systematic torture programs, some of them, but they're born into this psychopathy. After a while, a person, the brain starts to degenerate at that level
Yeah.
of monstrosity. So again, should we have compassion for them? Well, not for the ones that know what they're doing, right?
Right. Right. And, you know, another factor in all this is Project Monarch. Monarch is a sub-project of MK Ultra that relies on multi-generational effects. And that is ultimately what's been imposed on the global society to dumb us all down, you know, in essence, to shut down more and more neuron pathways in the brain to keep us compliant and easily led. It's it had been found in the Hitler-Himmler research that after 3 generations, any knowledge base, abuse base, or belief system becomes autogenic in the brain. It's passed down genetically, and we're born with that knowledge. So when people are conditioned to accept big pharma generation after generation after generation, they're more apt to be open to it and susceptible to it from the get-go. And likewise with the pedophile agenda that has been pushed since Project Paperclip, and Walt Disney was affiliated with that, and NASA and DARPA, you know, and we look back on that Disney aspect right from the get-go. The cartoons were embedded with the promotion of pedophilia. Well, that has been going on for generations subliminally, and it just keeps getting promoted. People wonder, how did we get to this point where our children are being openly sexualized in the school systems? It's because of the generational conditioning of making people compliant and more open to that concept, because it destroys the human brain. It destroys our critical analysis free thought. It takes us from our free will soul expression. It's such a detriment to our brains, shutting down neuron pathways. We can all heal by opening them back up. But for now, we've had generations of them shut down, shut down, shut down. And we're being born dumbed down and compliant as a result. So we've got quite a ways to go to undo this this monarch MK Ultra assault on our humanity. But the good news is, and I'm living proof of it, soul is stronger than genetics. Once we reclaim our free thought and our soul expression, we win. I mean, we can overcome it all. There's nothing we can't overcome when we align with the divine and reclaim our birthright to these kind of freedoms.
Yeah, it's amazing. Before we go any further into this kind of Wizard of Oz and Lizard of Oz and stuff that I want to kind of, help people understand, just a quick thing. I remember years ago hearing about this kid, Johnny, and Johnny's parents were helicopter parents, and Johnny had ADHD and he had dyslexia, and they're like, welcome to the club, me too, boy. But anyway,
Yeah.
and then all these labels, and he'd have to clap, 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 and hop, 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 and bang, 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 and all these little things before he could do anything. And his parents were exhausted watching this jumping and leaping and tapping out and banging his head, and really this boy was disabling himself, and the parents like, oh, poor Johnny, and not mocking Johnny, but it was enabled. It wasn't anyway. In the end, it was decided to go and see his grandfather and stay a couple of days on the farm. Well, for after an hour of Johnny jumping and jumping and missing cracks and jumping over cowpats, his granddad went, Johnny, knock that shit off, and whacks him right on the ear. And Johnny went thunk, and Johnny was cured. Let me tell you, Johnny was cured. It was like in that 5 seconds. So it's that side of things. And then there was another, when I was living in America, there was another story of this, the kitties. Oh, let your child decide, are they a boy? Are they a girl? Or are they a kitty cat? Or a dog or a puppy? Right?
Yeah.
Right? It's happening. Anyway, so this kid's boy goes into the school, and his mum and dad said, yeah, so right now he's identifying as a cat. And here's his litter box. And the teacher said, what? He's gonna act like a cat. He's gonna poop in a litter box in my classroom. And she said, get out of here, and that's what it needs. Like,
Yes.
flip them like little Johnny, like, stop it. And like
Yeah.
the generational abuse of the teachers, now the LGBT teachers, God love them for the trauma they've gone through and the mass brain and the trauma, everything they've gone through to create this ultra confusion and the pornographic books, the soft porn in the classrooms and all of that. But that is again all being exposed. I know there's going to be some children that are just so traumatized, and there will be, I pray, enough support later on. But right now, as it's being exposed, as it's showing its ugly self everywhere, we need to talk to these things, to these events. And again, if anyone chooses to be offended by my stories there, then that's because they're choosing to be offended. It's like the women we know who are in these, satanic abusive situations that you and Rachel Vaughan and Gloria Masters and our friend Max Stone have been in, who attack you girls. I'm the handler of you all, obviously, because I'm trying to share your stories with the world and honor you and love you, but I'm the handler. And something gets triggered in them and they turn on each other. It happened in my inner circle recently. The turning, the viper turn. You went, oh, I did not see that wolf in my hen house. I did not realize that loving angel is not a loving angel. And some program's gone and bang, they've gone. And they reached a ceiling and they can no longer get there. That's why we're smashing ceilings in this conversation.
Yeah.
Tell us about what you know about Marilyn Monroe and the term presidential model, please.
Well, she was one of the first, and Gerald Ford called her that. My owner in MK Ultra Mind Control, Senator Byrd, called her that, and was part of manipulating her. It was she was abused as a child, and they capitalized it in MK Ultra Mind Control, and uh, because she was so easy to manipulate and lead, she became a presidential model. One of the first ones termed that because she was sent in on the Kennedys very deliberately as an effort by Senator Byrd and the globalist agenda to compromise him. So that's how she became a presidential model, MK Ultra mind control slave. And after then, of course, she was killed. Senator Byrd would always tell me that if we could kill Marilyn Monroe right in front of the public eye, what makes you think we wouldn't do that to the likes of you? So that was a constant threat over my head that I would be killed too, because I wasn't even a public figure and they could dispose of me anytime they wanted to.
Just unthinkable. It's unthinkable. And again, we're giving public names, public people who have been through these programs at the most senior levels of society globally. I've done Oz, and the Oz cryptic language, as you explained earlier, the emerald earrings or the ruby shoes, or it's incredible to me reading your book, The Transformation of America, how many personnel were deeply programmed and would get triggered into a hypnotic response, or you would stand in front of a mirror and then and the nut job next to you that was taking you to your next assignment, meaning a brutal rape or you passing on information or whatever it was going to be, whatever assignment you were put on, that you would be spoken to in a poetic manner, engaging the brain. And as you went down in the lift, you would go further and further into trance. And Reagan would speak to you using words like, he'd call you kitten, right? Kitten. Um, and let's jump to Reagan actually ordered your death.
He vocalized it. I don't know that he was the one behind it per se, but he was the one who delivered the death sentence that I would go out in a blaze of glory at Bohemian Grove. That's what they do to MK Ultra mind control slaves of high level who have been exposed to so much of the globalist secrets. You know, they eliminate them around age 30 at Bohemian Grove. It's not that it's a sacrifice to the owl or whatever deity, you know, it's not that as much as it is, okay, we're getting rid of them. You can all see that they're dying right in front of you. So that was to be my demise. And fortunately, that's when Mark intercepted and lifted Kelly and I out of the swamp instead and saved my life and my mind. But the fact that Reagan had delivered it, it was during the course of a celebration of the opening of the Juarez border, the groundwork for NAFTA, which was the first step towards globalization in the New World Order. It was a very big event. It was all part of the drug and human trafficking ops across the open border. And he was telling De La Madrid, the president of Mexico, that that I was going to be killed with those secrets. So that's how that came about. I would highly suspect that George Bush was behind it. Of course, George Bush was there and was saying the same thing to his buddy, who was Carlos Salinas at the time, because coincidentally, however we want to look at it, Salinas ran Mexico during De La Madrid's reign the same way that Bush ran Reagan's administration. So I think both De La Madrid and Reagan were ultimately figureheads, and the real power behind the scene were Bush and Salinas. And so they were having their own brutal conversation about it. And it wasn't just a mere death sentence. It was, yeah, you know, they were going to make sure the secrets died with me. Of course, they were wrong. Fools.
Which is so great. It's so wonderful because, you know, reading about the way that you were traumatized and threatened, and they were laughing. There were so many of these men,
Yes.
Dick Cheney and Reagan and Bush
Yes.
and Clinton, laughing and mocking that you were going to be burnt alive in a snuff film. And they were joking about what was it going to be called, and ha ha, aren't they so clever? You know, and this is in front of your little girl as well, who was also living with that same trauma. And then her next handler was already decided. The brutality is just horrendous. Um, the Criminal Foundation of NAFTA. Can you explain to us what NAFTA stands for? What is it, and how did it kind of convene with the globalist agenda for one world
It
order?
was the North American Free Trade Agreement. It was just opening our borders in the U.S. to Mexico and Canada for the free trade. Really, it was just free trade of drugs and human trafficking, ultimately. But it was to get the people to accept the concept that we were going to be uniting with the rest of the world, and there would be no nations, no borders. That it would just be all one global government. And that was, of course, when George Bush was telling us that there was going to be the New World Order. It was right at the ground breaking of of NAFTA going through. So it was a major turning point, and it was one that they thought would um, make the globalization effort more acceptable to the minds of the people. So,
Yeah. With these criminal corruptions that these prominent leaders, global leaders, were doing, the trafficking drugs, trafficking children, trafficking arms, blaming and harming so many people, saying it was them, throwing innocent people in prison, torturing them, exactly, all of these horrific things, laughing at them when it's the very leaders that we thought we'd voted in, but they put themselves in those self-anointed,
right.
self-appointed situations. Tell us about what you knew about the weapons stockpiles in Nicaragua and Iraq, please.
Well, I knew about the weapons in Nicaragua, that we were going to be um, arming the Contras, and the whole Iran Contra affair was rooted in the drug and human trafficking, the drugs for arms deals, the whole bit. So I was very much used in those initial operations. I was at Guantanamo in Cuba, where they had a huge stash of the weapons that they were moving into Nicaragua and into Afghanistan. We were arming the Afghanis at the time, back when the Bin Ladens were associated with the CIA, because they were part of that arms and drug network. And ultimately, the drugs that George Bush was going for was the heroin industry in Afghanistan. So that's what the whole war was about. It gives it a whole different perspective when we understand what wars are really about and how they came about. But ultimately, at the beginning, we were arming Afghanistan back then in exchange for the drugs. So we had quite an open flow of all that back then. That I think a lot of that truth has been coming to light now, and people are realizing we've been fighting wars and putting innocent people in the line of fire for a long time.
May the accusations, may the realizations, and may the cases against these perpetrators begin. May the families whose children were slain in the name of a fake and false war, may they
Yeah.
step forward and stake their claims, because the more that humanity takes a breath and then steps forward in their own power towards this horrific, horrendous, lifelong, generational horror on us good humans, the better, the sooner, the better. And again, I have absolutely zero respect for authority. I don't care what you tell me you are. You show me who you are by your actions, and that's regular people too. We show each other who we are by our actions, by our passions, by our support and love for each other. And as humans, we're so clever. We can read frequency. We can feel if someone, there's something in there. There's something not right. We're getting better at it because they were so good. The Bushes and the Clintons and the Reagans and all the rest of it. You mentioned the Bin Ladens. So can you give us the information that you know about the Bin Ladens? Because I've only ever heard myself, like most people, of Osama bin Laden, who we were told in different areas that he was actually a part of the CIA originally and was given
Yes.
arms. So can you tell us what you know about that, please, and set some
Yes.
lies straight?
Well, that was George Bush's connection into the Afghanistan poppy fields. And when they needed to accelerate it further, we had 911 happen that traumatized the whole nation. And when that happened, while the nation was traumatized and highly suggestible, we were led into war. That was one of the biggest recruiting moments in the United States of leading people into war. And we went right into Afghanistan and took over the poppy fields. So, it was all set up from the beginning. I don't believe one word of the whole bin Laden fiasco that the media, as it was portrayed, because the alliance had already been, and they're just creating illusions from there. It's kind of like when we had Operation Just Cause, when we went in to Panama and arrested Noriega. That was right during when Bush was in office, and Bush and Noriega were closely aligned in the cocaine industry, and that was a major part of it. When Iran-Contra broke out, they wanted Noriega to be quiet about things, and Noriega wasn't cooperating. So then they went ahead with Operation Just Cause, and Bush quipped that it was just cause. Noriega wouldn't, you know, go underground to be quiet. So these wars that we've had and these takeovers have been so much a part of CIA drug operations, and um, it's absolutely horrific to know that people went patriotically to war thinking they were fighting for freedom when in fact they were fighting for drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. One area also to go into is, I mentioned last week that you share in your book how many times after an event, after a gang raping by these so-called men, by you being passed from one world leader to another, you would be zapped with a taser. You would be tasered. They would believe something electrical would short circuit. I mean, what did they actually think was going to happen by them tasering and torturing you?
Well, a stun gun was very much a part of MK Ultra programming because they would change the electric aspect of the, I guess, the way our brains flow or whatever. So they would disrupt it. So it was not uncommon at all to experience stun guns, and it was so common that stun gun prod marks were a signifier to people in the know. You know what someone was programmed for. You know if they were programmed for certain things. But the stun guns back then they were about 2 inches apart, one mole, and they called them beauty marks or whatever. But ultimately, it was a stun gun prod to indicate what someone had been programmed for. That's how prevalent these stun guns are used. There was a military video that Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino made with me on the military basis for training. How it was called "How to Create a Mind Control Slave Using a Stun Gun." So, I mean, it's not an uncommon thing. It's something that was very commonly used, and I'm sure still is. So,
Um,
it's horrific.
it just horrific. I mean, there's so many terrible things in this book, again, that we must put, FaceTime names, etc., to, so we can end this horror that's happening across.
Yeah. Yes.
It's still all happening. It's still all happening, isn't it, Cathy O'Brien?
It is. It's still happening. Mind control is expanded on such a mass scale now. But at the same time, like I said, people are waking up. It's happening. Too many of us have been affected in adverse ways. Too many of us have seen beyond the illusion. Too many of us have pulled back that proverbial wizard's curtain to see that it's just one person standing there pulling levers to make them look like the great and powerful Oz, when in fact, it's just somebody pulling levers. More people are onto that now. They've seen through the illusion, and it's like once you understand a magic trick, the spell is broken, and people are understanding it now, and the spell is broken.
The spell is broken. I wrote notes here on that you were again when the Juarez border was opened, and you were being used up before your 30th birthday, so you were just game for anybody wanted to harm you. You were taken to a Masonic lodge, an identified Masonic lodge in Warren, Ohio, and they used you up in this Masonic lodge to celebrate trade benefits. And there was also a horrendous but very famous monstrous singer, who one time he was coming one way, and I think it was Aquino coming another. Aquino being that ugly guy with the weird, freaky eyebrows, the devil's worshiper who set up the Temple of Seth, and also wrote the Chaplain book in the military that apparently Dr. Lee Merritt told me is still being used today. And who was that singer that had been also traumatizing you and torturing you?
Kristofferson, he was actively involved in MK Ultra. Um, um, was he Oxford trained or something? He just was really high up in the order of MK Ultra mind control aspects, was friends with Aquino and many other perpetrators like Senator Byrd. And yeah, he was horrific. People didn't realize it. He wrote songs like Sunday Morning Coming Down, and people think, well, let's think about those lyrics a minute here. It's really funny how people um, just gravitate to who has the harmonics that vibrate the frequency, the neuron pathways in their brain, who has been given the harmonic keys to manipulate minds. And then the lyrics that go in from there are absolutely horrific. And Kristofferson was very willing and strong participant of all of that. He was very much a part of using MK Ultra slaves like myself. He assaulted me on several occasions, right on my handler's farm in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, because he was out there all the time with other people in the entertainment industry. So it was, yeah, there's a lot of people that were involved on various levels, but he was especially horrific, and I think there's a lot of survivors who have named him and have tried to bring that truth to light. But sometimes it's hard to get past people's idolization of people that have been created through the use of harmonics and repetitive manipulation to accept their so-called talent.
Yeah, and it's like us starting this broadcast today off with Reagan, and breaking that illusion, and of course Nancy Reagan was aware of a lot of the things going on. How could she possibly not be, right?
I have no idea. I didn't know Nancy. I do know that she was probably manipulated, like most of the wives um, that never did anything. They were usually somewhere else and not really aware of what was going on. I don't know the different levels of control for the various wives, and I can't say that about Nancy one way because I didn't know her.
Okay, that's actually quite nice to not, have a terrible story about her too. But, again, if her husband, Ronald Reagan, was using and abusing you, then it's horrendous on every single level. It really is. So although we've mentioned so many names of globally famous, well-known people today, there are so many that we haven't mentioned, and I don't want people to worry, about any more today, because that's quite enough. I think at this stage, and for people to know also that you are speaking at Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference, and you will be obviously sharing a lot more of the insidiousness and the intelligence and the way things are done there. I was telling you earlier that our beautiful friend Daniel Brinkley was on yesterday, and he knows you, and he mentioned the fact that he has worked in military at a very senior level, which is also including government and presidents, and he has witnessed firsthand the atrocities that you speak to. And he said, I am a firsthand witness, Danny, to the things that Cathy O Brien has reported. And he's another beautiful senior angelic vibration on this planet that is just so full of love, and speaks out. Of course, he died 3 times near-death experiences. And the first time he died, he was struck by lightning. And he admits himself he was a brutal asshole. He was in the Marines and he was arrogant and he kind of, got slammed. He got good and done. And then there were 2 more times, or 3 more times at least, where he was revived from, again, near-death experience. So no one's been dead more times than him. And as I said to you earlier, his work now is to bring those in hospice to end of life care, loving them and telling them that there's so much more. There's another adventure to go on to, which is so beautiful. And so many great things and so many great speakers coming. And I can't believe you're coming to Galactic Spiritual Informers. I'm so thrilled to have you this year. Plus, we'll have Max Lowen, also a friend of yours too, who was trafficked through the Vatican. And Elena Danan, JP, Tony Rodriguez, who was trafficked through the military too. JP, who's been to the moon on military craft. All the secrets, we're bringing them all from every imaginable aspect on this planet. We're blowing it all open with evidence at the Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection. Cathy O Brien, give us your final loving words of the day before we bring this to a close, my love.
Well, when people understand the components of mind control, we have a defense against it. And it's more important for understanding that so that we take our own power back than it is to know who exactly is involved in this. We need to know why they were involved in it. We need to know what the ultimate end game was. And the end game is to stop our spiritual expression, to align us with their criminal, DARPA generated artificial intelligence plan. It's not going to happen. You know, all we need to do is reclaim our free thought, free will, strength of spirit. Our wisdom outthinks their criminal mind. We are the victory. We have the victory within us. It's already born into us. It's just a matter of everybody, everywhere. Remember who you are, why you're here. Gather that strength of spirit and start living the love you are. It's our victory.
So beautiful, Cathy. Thank you so much. And I love it when you always say, live the love you are. It is a beautiful statement and it is a worthy goal to attain. And it's a truth that every being can actually grow. So thank you, Cathy, so much. And to you beautiful guys out there, if you haven't got your tickets to Galactic Spiritual Informers, get on it. And the conference itself is being held in the Le Meridian part, and the other tower is the Sheraton, where the beautiful refurbished hotel rooms are. So you need to know that. So when you're booking your ticket, after you get your ticket, you'll then get the code to get the discounted bedrooms in the Sheraton Tower next door. It's all connected. You go across the hallway from the Sheraton bedrooms and dining area across the hall into Le Meridian, the conference area. But in the Sheraton, you get the discounted tower and rooms, and you get the discounted car park. All these little things help. It all helps at the end of the day. So again, to you guys, my name is Danny Henderson. I send you love from my heart to yours, and I can't wait to see you guys soon. And thank you, Cathy O Brien. Love you so much.
Thank you.